Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. How you doing today? I am Jibril Khalifa Sadat with Mark Hunter Brooks, and we're here to talk about spirituality, right? And this is our second bite of the apple because we did this podcast last week, but unfortunately, we were having a lot of interference and internet problems. This is the 21st century, after all. And so we decided to try to redo it again and rebroadcast it again. So hopefully, this conversation will be as stimulating as the last conversation if I can remember what I said, because in these days and times, you say something once at night and you want to tend to forget it. So that's what we're going to talk about. But uh, in all seriousness, spirituality, people always, like to come up to you and they tell you, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, right? I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not a religious person. So, it makes me wonder when people tell me that, do they have a definition for spirituality? What do they mean by that they have spirit, but they don't have religion? And what is this religious thing? Religion was not something that we've had all these years, not the word exactly, but we had these things which I like to call wisdom traditions. And we eventually came up with the word religion because it comes from the Latin religare, right? To hold on to bind, to unite. So I try to figure out when they talk about they're spiritual and not religious, are they talking about they don't want to go with the dogma of what we call
Mhm.
organized religion? Do they don't want to pray, or maybe they pray a different kind of way than religious people pray? Do they not like to read the books, the revealed religions, or the Quran, or the Bible, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the Nimabapa, or the Upanishads, or they just don't want to deal with that? You know, is that what they mean by when they talk about I'm spiritual and not religious? And then let's talk about the spirit. What is the spirit? Well, in Christianity, you have the Holy Spirit. In Islam, when we talk about the spirit, we talk about in Arabic, it's called the ruh. And the ruh can have more than one meaning. It can mean spirit, but it also means breath. The breath that comes inside of us and animates this, what we call the mortal body. And when we look at, yoga, or we look at Buddhism, or we look at, even in Christianity with the chants, and in Judaism with Kabbalah and stuff like that, we find the breath to be an important part of whatever kind of activity they go through to try to enhance their understanding of the unseen, the Creator, what I call Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And it's through the breath that we get animated. So how does this happen? First, when we grow into our mother's womb, the physical body grows, then matter grows. And then some believe after a certain time that the soul enters the body, but the soul is asleep, the soul is dormant. So it's not into the latter part where the breath of Allah goes into your body that the soul alights and the light comes on in your eyes, and the soul animates the body and the body's ever moved. My master told me this thing. He said, "Do you know what this is?" And I was like, "What?" He said, "This is where God puts his finger and goes into your nostrils and to light your soul." So when a baby comes out of this warm, wet, dark hole through the feces and the urine, and even sometimes before it's even smacked on his butt, it comes into this cold, lighted room and it starts screaming. Ah! Why is it screaming? Is it screaming because it needs air? Or is it truly screaming because the soul understands what's waiting for him in this cold, hard world? Think about it. Think about the metaphor. Think about the allegory. You come out of something that's soft, that's warm, that's nourishing, and all of a sudden you thrust into this cold, lighted world that you have to deal with for the rest of your life until you end this mortal part of your life. And that's all of a sudden that tells you about your spirit. Because without the spirit, without the breath of Allah, you cannot, your soul cannot be animated. You cannot move. You cannot talk. It all goes together. All three goes together. In the West, we live with this Cartesian fallacy of mind body, that they're separated. Not separated. If I go in and number one, no one knows what the mind is. But for science sake, let's say it's connected to the brain. So if I go in and I cut open your head and take out your brain, which a lot of people like to believe that's where the mind's at, which it isn't, the body doesn't move. And if I put the brain in a formaldehyde, guess what? The brain doesn't do anything. So it's not either or, it's both. It's not a mind body duality, it's a unitive product. All the things that we have, our spirit, our soul, our body, works in tandem, works together. So when we say we are spiritual, we are acknowledging there's something deeper inside of us, a part of the divine inside of us, that regardless of what religion that we use externally, that the spirit, the part of divineness, is in us internally, and that's something we can never get rid of.
There you go. So let me kind of add a little bit to that, because Jibril did a great opening for all this. And I've been interested in the mechanics of spirituality, and as a way to put it. But the big question that I think a lot of people ask, especially people who are more into science and materials, is it real? And does it all exist, or is this just a bunch of mythology that people are spouting? And this is a remnant from years and millennia long ago. Well, let me tell you, I mean, from personal experience, I will tell you that spirituality is real. It does exist, but I can't explain it for you to where you would know. You really have to experience it to know, but to be able to experience it, you have to feel it internally in yourself. And what's the role of religion? Religion is there to tell you in your life, and as Jabril was saying, you're born into this life, into this cold, hard life, not knowing anything about the world or about the spiritual world, the physical world or the spiritual world. But one of the things that religion does teach you is it teaches you about the spiritual world and gives you a grounding in what it is, and kind of some general ideas of how it works. But you need that, and we've talked about this before, is with the analogy of having a rowboat tied to a dock. Is you have to sit there and learn how to row. You have to learn how to get in that boat and get used to it. But eventually you have to take the rope off the dock and row on the river yourself. But religion gives you that ability to understand the river of spirituality, so that when you have to get out on your own and live this life, you can live a spiritually based life, because you understand it from an intellectual perspective. And that's what religion gives you. One of the things too, a way to look at spirituality is to say that it's part of a continuum. Is you have people who absolutely don't believe in it and are very steadfast against it, and there are people who fully believe in it and are steadfast for it. And there are people all along that line in between the two. But to get you started on that line, I think that's where religion comes in. In all the different world religions teach you different aspects of religion or of the spiritual world, and each different religion gives you a different aspect of it. And I think it's important to be exposed to multiple religions because you can find out more about this whole spiritual existence by becoming acquainted with that and then understanding more about the people who live according to those religions. And as Jabril would say with Islam, Islam is a way of life. It's not, a service you go to once a week or something you do for just a few hours on one day of the week. It's a way you live your life. And that's the way religion ought to inform you in your spiritual existence. But eventually, as you get older, and as you become wiser, as you've experienced this life and know what works and what doesn't work, you begin to integrate what you understand intellectually with your life experiences and whatever spiritual practices you have, and that's when you really develop spirituality. But it's an internal thing. It's not an external thing. It's not something you can read in a book and say, "Aha." It's something that you have to experience and gradually grow into. But one of the things that's really important about spirituality is it's the empathy and compassion and sensitivity it gives you to the lives of other people. And it's a blessing to be able to help someone else out in their life, to help them go through a difficult time in their life, difficult period in their life, or help them to better understand an event that happened in their life or to the lives of someone they love, and to help them learn how to live through or experience, the things that they've experienced. And I think that's one of the things that spirituality gives us, is it gives us this empathy for other spiritual beings. And if we look at everybody else, not only as humans, but as fellow spiritual beings who are on a similar path here on this earth to learn about themselves in a spiritual way, but also to understand and control their instincts, their emotions, their egos, and their thoughts. And that's what spirituality teaches them. That's what religion informs them about from an intellectual standpoint. It gives them the ability to help others who are in similar situations or who are experiencing things they've experienced in the past, to help them in their spiritual life as well. But just to come back to this whole point is spirituality. Yes, it's a real thing. Does the spirit world exist? Yes, it absolutely does, without a doubt, 100%. But can I get you to that point? No, you have to get yourself to that point. And you can only you can change yourself, and only you can experience spirituality, but you have to go through and understand it intellectually. Then you understand it from a more spiritual standpoint by living your life and helping others in their lives with it as well, because that's not only a human thing, but that's a spiritual thing too, as we go through our daily lives and living.
Aristotle said that human beings are a rational animal. And that's true. We are a rational animal. But we are an animal, and that's the operative word. But the thing about it being animal and being rational is because that's the external part. Our matter is the external part of us. We have an internal part too. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we have a spiritual side of us. And that spiritual side is that part of divinity that's within each one of us. We're going to take that around till we end this mortal life, because that's the only way that we can operate in this life, is for our soul to be driven by the breath of Allah, the spiritual breath, or some Christians would call it the Holy Spirit. And how do we do that? Most of us now, we live, especially in the West, we live in a materialistic and a consumerism driven world. And we see everything on the outside. You see people getting cut up. You see people doing all other things to their bodies to make them feel good. And I'm not knocking this, and I'm not saying it's wrong or anything. But what I'm saying is that people need to look at what truly you're doing. These bodies are not ours. We're on loan for this body from 0 to 70 years to 80 years if you're lucky, maybe a little bit longer. But that's it. And that's only a drop in the stream of space. So what are we going to do with these bodies that we have that we're going to belong to? Are we going to put all our interests and time and energy and money in these bodies, or are we going to turn inward and try to put our energy into what's inside to get us closer to our creator? Why did Allah make man? God made man, so God said, I made man so I could be known. Not in egotistical sense, because Allah has no ego, but to be known that this is the entity that brought you into life and that you need to get back closer to. And that's what our purpose in this life is, and that's the purpose of spirituality. So we can turn inward and we can look in ourselves and improve ourselves and to remember who we were, to drop a veil from over our soul. As I said that, once upon a time, that our soul is like a mirror. And the breath that comes into our body is like a light. And the light shines on the mirror, and the mirror glows outward. That's why when you look in someone's eyes, especially someone's eyes that has really truly understand who they are and what they are, you see a shine to it. You see a glow to it. People used to talk about this with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and about Jesus also, peace and blessings be upon him. That you've seen a light coming from their face, you've seen a glow because their soul was lit with the spirit from God and it's shown all through their bodies. And no matter what people did to them, that shine will still be there. And then you ask me, okay, Jibril, you're so smart. What about people who do bad things? What about people who kill and people who all this other stuff? If you're so smart, where's the shine in them if they have this part of divinity in them? It's easy. It's because every time we do wrong, we put a little mud on that mirror. The more wrong we do, the more mud we scoop up and we put on that mirror. And when evil truly comes, it comes because we have put so much mud on that mirror that it can't reflect the light from the spirit. It cannot reflect the light from the divine. It changes our whole personality. It changes our whole consciousness, our subconscious, our unconscious. It changes who we are. And that's how we truly become evil. In theodicy and Christian theology, they always have this question about how can a good God let there be evil? It's not like a good God let there be evil. Evil exists. Evil exists because of man's nature. It's the same way that we can have a destiny, but we can have free will. There's certain things we don't understand, but it happens anyway. We breathe every day, but we cannot understand how we breathe automatically. We just breathe. So we can't understand how evil happens. It happens. And that's the true way life is. But how do we become more, like Mark was saying, using that analogy, is that you can be on a rowboat, but you have to be moored. The thing religion is good for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I have sent a prophet to all men. All human beings have some kind of revelation, some kind of prophet to lead them the way. And we need this. We need religion to show us the way. It starts with religion. Can I be spiritual without religion? Well, you're spiritual anyway. But how do I connect to that to spirituality? How do I use that spirituality to get closer to my creator? You use it by understanding the prophets who came before you, the revelation that they brought down to tell you what you need to do to get closer, to be more spiritually adept. And it takes time. People like to poo-poo religion, say, "Oh, well, religions have done bad things." And it's all true, but it's not the religion that's done these things. It's the people who profess these religions and who use these religions for their own gain. It's just like people ask, want to say, "Is America a racist country?" No, America's not a racist country, but a lot of people who ran America was racist. It's a difference. I don't hate my country. I love my country because my country didn't do anything to me. It was the people who ran my country who did things to me, which is a difference. And you have to understand that, just like you have to understand religion. It's not religion that is bad. It's the people who ran the religion because why? They are mortal human beings who didn't listen to the spiritual side of it, who listened to the more animalistic side of it. It reminds me of the story, right? If I'm permitted for a minute. It was this king that was living on a golden throne. And one day he woke up and he was trying to figure out, how can I get closer to Allah? How can I be a more spiritual person and get closer to my creator? So one day, half asleep, he was sitting on his golden throne and he heard this running across his roof. And he was like, who the hell is running across my roof in this palace? They must be crazy. So he looked up from his throne and he kept hearing these footsteps. And then he looked up and he seen a face look down through the mirror from on top of the roof. And he looked at the face and he said, what are you doing running on top of my roof? And the man said, well, I'm a farmer and I'm looking for my cattle. And the king said, you must be crazy. How you going to find cows on top of my roof? And the man said, I'm no more crazy than you, because how you going to find God sitting on a golden throne? That's life. Myself, I'm what they call a fakir. Fakir comes a word, an Arabic word, fakir means poverty. Jesus Christ once said, it's easier to get a camel through the eye hole of a needle than a rich man through the gates of heaven. I'm not knocking for everybody to be poor or whatever, but I'm saying spiritually, to be a spiritual person, you have to leave things away. You have to get away from things. You have to leave things off. You have to put it in your mind and in your soul and in your heart. And I'm not talking about the physical muscle that's beating on the left side of your chest, but your true center of your spirituality, your heart. You have to put it in your heart that all you want out of life is God, that you live for God. As I used to say all the time and still do, I live for the one and I die for the one. Al-Wahid is one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Ahad is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to live, in Islam, it's called taqwa. You have to be God conscious. You have to understand no matter what you do, where you at, God is always there. If you're in the bathroom, God is with you. If you're in the bedroom, God is with you. If you're at work, God is with you. No matter where you at, and no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. If you pickpocketing somebody, God sees you. God is there. If you're hurting somebody, beating somebody up, God is there. If you're cursing somebody, hurting them with your mouth, God is there. That is taqwa. That is God consciousness. That is spirituality. Spirituality is not sitting and just meditating while your mind running all over places and saying, meditation is good. Meditation will get you closer. But it's not only meditation. It's the work you do. It's the people you help.
Mhm.
It's the way you carry yourself. This is all spirituality. Spirituality is not one thing, it's all things.
Mhm.
Because when you talk about being spiritual, you're talking about raising the divine inside of you. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, well, and Jabril, you
You
made a
just
great point. Talking about the camel and the eye of the needle is it depends on your worldview, and this is going back to the podcast title, the spiritual worldview, as to how you see things around you. If you have a physical worldview or a material worldview, you're only going to see things in this physical world and physical existence, and there's nothing really spiritual there. What's there in the spiritual worldview is to realize that everyone around you, everything around you, is living, and it's they're all like you. You're living just like they're living, and you develop this sensitivity to the lives and to the suffering of other people. And it's that sensitivity that is trying to be developed in you in this life here on earth, and to do that, to be able to have that empathy, that compassion, that love for other people, you have to go through and do a lot of work, and that's part of the spiritual journey, is to help you learn how to love all different types of people, different types of individuals, and to be a productive and beneficial part of society and the community, but in the world as well, and to be there to help change in a positive way, not only your life, but the lives of those people around you. And it can be just as little as a conversation with somebody else, to comfort them or to encourage them as they're going through a struggle in their own life. That's that part of the whole spiritual side of living, is helping other spiritual beings along on their path as you're going along yours, and accepting the love and the compassion and the empathy from other people when you're going through hard times, to help you get along in that difficulty, so that you can emerge from it and become a stronger spiritual being. But it's all about loving other people. It's all about humanity. And Jabril had a really touching story that he told me before we got on. I hope you can remember that. Um, but it was just it was talking about this conversation you had with somebody. I know you're
yeah,
kind of
you know,
looking inquisitive, but it was just
you're
really
talking
important.
about when about the RIS, the young
Yes.
lady with the RIS. The young lady. Well, I had received a letter from the RIS about something I didn't understand, and I called this woman, and she turned out to be a grandmother of a veteran of a Afghan veteran, because this was right after they just pulled out of Afghanistan, and and because she working for the government, and everything is being recorded, so she really couldn't talk that much, but we were talking, and it seemed like the letter was nothing. The letter should have been sent out 6 months ago, so it was like a fluke. And as I was talking to her, I realized that it was not a fluke, because all there's no coincidences in life, and
Mhm.
all things in life matters if you're willing to look for it and you're willing to understand it. And so the problem was that her grandson was having problems coming back from Afghanistan. And I had went through sort of the same things when I had gotten out. And when I was talking about my behavior, she started saying, "Yeah, her grandson exhibited the same kind of behavior when I had gotten out 40 some years earlier." So it was the same kind of trauma that we both went through as young men. And I could tell, and I was telling Mark, I could tell in her voice how it was cracking, that she wanted to cry, but she was trying to keep her professionalism steady. So and I was told, she told me, she said, well, and then she was trying to brush us off, and she said, well, he'll be all right. And I told her, no, ma'am, he won't be all right. And I was telling her that he needs help, and he needs time, and he needs patience, but to make sure he gets some help. So I finally told her, before we ended our conversation, I said, this is no coincidence. I said, I'm supposed to talk to you today. And she said, yeah. She said, I kind of realized that too. And that's what spirituality is all about. I got this innocuous letter that's supposed to have been sent 6 months ago, but somehow it was delayed in the mail. How, why, who knows? And I made this call to the IRS, and who knows who you're going to talk to if you talk to anybody in the IRS these days. And she happens to answer this phone at this time to talk to me. And she happened to have a grandson who come out of Afghanistan that had the same kind of or similar kind of problems that I had when I got out of the service 40 some years ago. How do you make that a coincidence? But if you spiritually inclined, if you understand how, if you have taqwa, if you have a God consciousness, you understand how all these things come to you and they flow through you because how the whole universe works in tandem because the whole universe is one. You are it and it is you. All humanity is one. I am Mark, Mark is me. And when you understand that, you can understand what they're going through, what they're feeling. And Mark was true when he said this. The one thing that's holding all this together is love. And we're not talking about the passionate, I got to tear your clothes off and jump you in the bed and make you, and we both get sweaty kind of love. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the true, pure love that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in all of us to care for each other, to respect each other. And the one thing we must do is be of service to each other. And I'm going to let that be the end of it because we didn't went over our 30 minutes. And I'm going to tell you, this is Jibril Khalifa Al Salat and Masalat.
Yeah, this is Mark Hunter Brooks too. We hope you enjoyed the Spiritual Worldview podcast for Worldly Spiritual, and hope you'll join us again. Take care.